Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Aleph, Daf 31 of Masechta Yevamos. Friends, today we continue from our discussion from yesterday about different kind of Safek Gittin and Safek Kiddushin in the context of Yibum when you have an erva, right? So we had said that when it comes to all the 15 arayos that are listed at the beginning of the Masechta, so if either, let's say you had Reuven was married to his brother Shimon's daughter, right? So Reuven's married to Sarah and to Rivka. Now Sarah is his brother Shimon's daughter. So now, since Reuven and Sarah are married, so then Sarah's co-wife Rivka doesn't do if Reuven dies, then Rivka doesn't do Yibum with Shimon on account of being the co-wife of Sarah, who's his daughter. So now, but we say, what if the marriage was only a Safek marriage? Or what if they got divorced but it was a Safek divorce? So the Mishnah had said that whenever you have a Safek, so then you do Chalitza, you don't do Yibum. And we had explained that in a situation, let's say by Kiddushin, so if Reuven throws like a ring towards Sarah and it lands unclear if it's closer to him or closer to her. So in that case, it's a Safek Kiddushin that maybe they are married, and therefore we have to be concerned that, just in case they're married, so then Rivka wouldn't be doing Yibum with Shimon. But at the same time, we said that the Chazaka, however, was that they aren't married, and that Rivka would do Yibum with Shimon, right? Meaning, Reuven and Rivka are married right now, right? And Sarah is a Safek. So what do we know for sure? We know that Reuven and Rivka are married, and if Reuven dies, then Rivka would have to do Yibum with Shimon. However, we have some kind of a Safek of whether Reuven is maybe married to Sarah, in which case then Rivka would be potter from Yibum. So we say that she does Chalitza rather than Yibum. Now, we had said, however, the Mishnah had left out a situation which would be the same by Gittin, which is that if Reuven throws a get to Sarah, right? So meaning Reuven is married to Sarah as well as to Rivka. So now the Chazaka is that if Reuven were to die, well, since Rivka and Sarah are co-wives and Sarah's potter from Yibum because she's the daughter of Shimon, so then the Chazaka is that Rivka would not be doing Yibum. Now, the Mishnah had left out the case of if Reuven were to throw a get and it would land 50, halfway between Reuven and Sarah, and we're not sure who it's closer to. So the Mishnah did not list that as an example of where Rivka would do Chalitza with Shimon rather than Yibum. And we had said because, well, the Chazaka is that Reuven is married to both Sarah and to Rivka. Now, we have a Safek here, which is that maybe they're divorced. But on account of the Safek, that's not going to overpower the Chazaka, which is that Reuven is married to Sarah and to Rivka, and therefore we leave out that case in the Mishnah, and we do not say that Rivka will do Chalitza, because if you do Chalitza, then that might end up leading to Yibum, and we don't want you to do Yibum in this case, because since the Chazaka is that Reuven is married to both Sarah and to Rivka, and Rivka is in erva with Shimon, because it's Shimon's daughter, so then Sarah is Shimon's daughter, so then Sarah does not do Yibum with Shimon, and Rivka is the co-wife, she's also potter. If we would say that Rivka should do Chalitza, then she might end up also doing Yibum, and that would be a problem, since the Chazaka is that she would be potter from Yibum. So we're kind of working with that scenario right now, and that kind of leads into our daf today, which is daf Lamed Aleph from Masechta Yevamos, starting about 2, 4, 6 lines into the page. Eis ve'abai. Now Abai asks a kasha. Nofal Abai is olav v'abas ochiv. Ve'in yadua eiz meim meis rishon tzoros ucholetzes v'lo misyabemes. You hear that, friends? we have a situation where Reuven is married to Sarah and to Rivka, and Sarah, in this case, is Shimon's daughter. So Reuven is married to Sarah and to Rivka. Sarah is Reuven's brother Shimon's daughter. Reuven and Sarah are in a house. The house falls down. Both Reuven and Sarah die. Okay. So let's read that again. So a house collapses on Reuven and on Sarah, who's his brother Shimon's daughter. And Reuven is also married to Rivka. And we don't know who died first. Now, what's the nafkamina? Well, if Reuven dies first, well then, that means that at the time that he died, both Sarah and Rivka, had to do Yibum with Shimon, but Sarah is Shimon's daughter, so therefore she's potter from Yibum, and so is Rivka as the co-wife. But if Sarah died first, well then that means that when Reuven died, he was no longer married to Sarah because she had already died, in which case Rivka would do Yibum with Shimon. So in this case we say, we don't know who died first. Did Rivka die first, in which case did Sarah die first, in which case Rivka should do Yibum, or did Reuven die first, in which case Rivka does not do Yibum. So what do we say? So we say that Rivka does chalitza. Amai, how come? No, friends, what's the chazak over here? The chazaka over here is that Reuven is married to Sarah and to Rivka. Now, we have a suffix. We're not sure. Did Reuven die first? In which case, Rivka is potter from Yibum. Or did Sarah die first? In which case, Rivka is chayiv to do Yibum. We don't know. But we do have a chazaka. And the chazaka is that Reuven is married to both Sarah and to Rivka. And that Rivka is potter from Yibum on account of being the co-wife of Sarah. So Amai, why do we say that Rivka does chalitza? That Rivka has a chazaka that she's potter from Yibum and she can go out and marry whoever she wants. And you're coming now out of the suffix of, well, maybe Sarah died first, and maybe Rivka needs to do Yibum with Shimon. Don't make Rivka also out of this suffix, and now she has to do chalitza. And if you're going to say, yeah, we're just being machmir, and say, look, just do chalitza anyways, just in case Rivka died, Sarah died first. But it's a chumrah that can end up leading to a kula. Because if you say that she should do chalitza, well then she might end up doing yibum, which could be a problem, right? Because in general, right, chalitza applies in a place where there's yibum. And in this case, if Rivka does yibum, it could be a problem because, in this case, if Rivka does yibum, it could be a problem because the chazaka is that she was potter from yibum as a co-wife of Sarah. So saying chalitza, saying to do chalitza, sure, it's a chumrah, but it's a chumrah that can come to a kula, in that Rivka might end up doing yibum with Shimon, who the chazaka says that she really shouldn't be doing yibum with Shimon. So, and for the Gemara, look, this concept of that we're concerned that if you can do chalitza, you might do yibum. So in the context of divorce, of gerushin, right, we said in our Mishnah, it left out the case of where the get was 50%, right, where it was a suffix, if it was closer to him or closer to her. So we said in that case, Rivka would not do chalitza, because then we're concerned that she might do yibum. But look, divorce is a more common thing, as opposed to mapolis de lo shrichi lo gazbu rabbanon. Whereas a house falling down is a less common case, and because it's a less common case, the rabbis didn't necessarily make a gezeira, and they said, look, just let her do chalitza, and that's that. Inami, or else gerushin de kaima erva. When it comes to gerushin, when it comes to divorce, where Sarah is here in front of us, the kamuchach, that it's provable. Kilu, Sarah is here, and the chazaka is, and the chazaka is that Sarah and Rivka, right? Everybody knows that Sarah and Rivka were married to Reuven. V'kamatzurchos lo chalitza, and all of a sudden we're saying that Rivka needs to do chalitza. Amir kamu berabbanan begita digitim alyahu. We'll say, oh wow, this is interesting. Reuven was married to Sarah and to Rivka. Sarah is Shimon's daughter. All of a sudden Rivka is doing chalitza. It must be that get was a proper get, and Reuven and Sarah are really divorced, and that's why Rivka is doing chalitza, and they might actually end up doing yibum, litzar, right? So Rivka might end up doing yibum, whereas mapoles, the rabbis aren't prophets. How are the rabbis supposed to know who died first? So therefore, when it comes to the house that falls down, and right, Reuven and Sarah were both killed in that house, and now Rivka is doing yibum with Shimon, they'll say, well, makes sense. I'm sorry, not yibum, chalitza. So we'll say, well, I get it. It makes sense. How could anybody know who died first? So therefore, just in case Sarah died first, just let Rivka do chalitza, and that's that. But when it comes to divorce, then by the fact that, if we see Rivka doing chalitza, then they'll say what? They'll say, well, I guess the rabbis ascertained that it was a good divorce, because it was a proper divorce. That's why Rivka is doing chalitza. Then she might end up coming to do yibum. And therefore, we have to be more careful when it comes to divorce, as opposed to the house that falls down. We could say there that Rivka does chalitza. But 1 second. Friends, you ready for this kasha? The Gemara asks, but 1 second. Is this really the case that when it comes to divorce, when it comes to a suffix divorce, Rivka does not do chalitza? Because we're concerned that if you do chalitza, then you might do yibum. V'atanan, we learn in a Mishnah in Gittin, that if Rivka was standing in the public domain, v'zarku la, and they threw a get to Rivka, karuv la megoreshes, karuv la ina megoreshes. If it's closer to Rivka, so then Rivka is divorced. If it's closer to Reuven, Rivka is not divorced. Merza al merza, if it's 50%, if it's half and half, megoreshes veina megoreshes. So then she's divorced and she isn't divorced. So what does it mean she's divorced and she isn't divorced? Well, the koyinu asurle. Well, if he's a koyin, so then she's forbidden to him. Meaning that they can't get remarried, right? Usually if you get divorced, you can get remarried, but if this koyin, they can't get remarried because she's a divorcee. V'i erva he, and if she's an erva, tsarasa baya chalitza. And if she's an erva, then her Sarah requires chalitza. Oh wait, oops, I shouldn't have used Rivka as example. Let's use Sarah. I think it's easy enough to switch, right? So basically, Reuven throws the get to Sarah, and it's 50% between him and Sarah. So we say it's, they're divorced and not divorced. What does it mean that they're divorced and not divorced? It means that if Reuven is a kohen, so they can't get remarried. But also, if Sarah is Reuven's niece, right? If Sarah is Shimon's daughter, so then because it's a suffix of whether the get is closer to him or closer to her, Rivka does chalitza. She does not do yibum. And we don't say shemata omer choletzes misya bemis. And we're not concerned that, well, if you say that she can do chalitza, she might do yibum. Boom. So there you have it. You see that we have a situation where in the case of divorce, we literally have the same exact case, that the bill of divorce is halfway between him, halfway between her, and the chazaka, of course, is that they're all married, right? That Reuven's married to Sarah and to Rivka, and the chazaka is that since Rivka is the co-wife of Sarah, if Reuven were to die, so then Rivka would not have to do anything. And yet we're saying that out of the Suffolk divorce, now we're saying that Rivka should do chalitza, and we're not concerned. Well, what if she ends up doing yibum, which would be against the chazaka, which would indicate that she doesn't do yibum? So says the Gemara, Itmar Allah, it's taught Rabba of Rav Yosef Dami Tarvayu, that say Rabba and Rav Yosef, Hocho b'shtekite edim oskinon. Here we're talking about, right, in this Mishnah Gittin, we're talking about where there were two groups of witnesses, two pairs of witnesses. Achas omer is karev lo, v'achas omer is karev lo. And they have conflicting testimonies. One pair of witnesses says that the bill of divorce landed closer to her. One pair of witnesses said that the bill of divorce landed closer to him. Da'avale sveka de oraisa. And therefore, because we have mamish, a pair of witnesses testifying that the bill of divorce was closer to Sarah, so therefore that takes on a status of a suffix de oraisa, and we have to really be concerned that maybe Sarah is divorced. And if Sarah is divorced, so then Rivka would have to do yibum with Shimon, and therefore we say that Rivka should at least do chalitza. Whereas our Mishnah over here, because achas, is talking about one pair of witnesses, and not only just one pair of witnesses, but meaning a total of two witnesses. Meaning you have one witness who's saying that the bill of divorce landed closer to her, one witness who's saying that the bill of divorce landed closer to him, the havli sveka dirabonon, which is really just a suffix dirabonon. Which is really just a suffix dirabonon, and because it's a suffix dirabonon, it's not strong enough to override the chazaka. So we have a chazaka that Ruvain, Sarah, and Rivka are all married, and therefore Rivka would be potter from yibum, and the suffix dirabonon is not going to override that chazaka, and therefore Rivka doesn't do anything. She doesn't do chalitza or nothing. So how come we're assuming that our Mishnah over here is talking about only two total witnesses, one to say closer to her, one to say closer to him? Do me the Kiddushin, because the answer is that it's similar to Kiddushin, right? If you look in the Mishnah, it says, are you boy in Kiddushin or Gerishin? So we're saying that the Gerishin are similar to the Kiddushin. Ma Kiddushin b'kas achas, have Gerishin b'kas achas. So just like the Kiddushin in our Mishnah is with one pair of witnesses, so also the Gerishin is v'Kiddushin gufay mimayde b'kas achas, dilma bebeis kitei edim. So says the Gemara, but asks the Gemara, why are we so sure that the Kiddushin in our Mishnah is talking about two total witnesses? Maybe it's talking about two pairs of witnesses. So answer the Gemara, no. Remember, we had said yesterday that when it comes to the suffix of Kiddushin, right, that if he throws some money and it lands halfway between him and her, we're not sure who it's closer to. So we said in that case, so Rivka does chalitza, right? We said, so what's the chazaka? The chazaka in this case is that Ruvain's married to Rivka, not to Sarah, right? Meaning up until now, Ruvain's just been married to Rivka. Now, he throws some money to Sarah in order to marry Sarah, who's of course Shimon's daughter, and it's halfway between him and her. It's a suffix. We're not sure if it's closer to him or to her. So we say, in that case, look, the assumption was, the chazaka was that Ruvain was only married to Rivka, and Rivka was going to have to be doing yibum with Shimon if Ruvain dies. And therefore, but now we have a suffix kiddushin that maybe he was married also to Sarah, and if he was married to Sarah, so then she would be potter from Rivka would be potter, Sarah and Rivka would be potter from yibum. So we say, look, just let Rivka do chalitza, and that's that. What if she ends up doing yibum? No big deal. I mean, the chazaka is that she was going to be doing yibum anyways. The chazaka is that Ruvain was only married to Rivka, and that if Ruvain were to die, Rivka would have to do yibum with Shimon. So we say, look, now we have a suffix of maybe he was also married to Sarah and she would be potter from yibum. So just let her do chalitza, and if she ends up doing yibum, it's not a big deal because that was the chazaka anyways. So now, for the Gemara, how do I know that the Mishnah is talking about where there are only one total pair of witnesses by the Kiddushin, i.e. there was no two witnesses testifying that it was an actual Kiddushin. So because if we have two pairs of witnesses, one pair testifying that the money was closer to him and that it's not good Kiddushin, one pair testifying that it was closer to her and it is a good Kiddushin, well, if that's the case, well then, it should be a suffix d'oraisa, that we should have to really be concerned that Reuven and Sarah are married and that Rivka would be pater from Yibum. So then how can we say, just let Rivka do chalitza, and even if it ends up leading to Yibum, it's not a big deal? We have two witnesses that are saying that the Kesef Kiddushin landed closer to Sarah, which means that Reuven and Sarah are married, which would mean that Sarah and Rivka would be pater from Yibum. And you're saying that just let them do Yibum and it's no big deal. And now the Gemara asks, Visu, and more so. I have another question. One second. When you have two pairs of witnesses, it's a suffix d'Rabbanan. Let's say that the two pairs of witnesses cancel themselves out. And that therefore we would keep the women. Rivka on a chazaka, right? So even in the situation where Reuven is married to Sarah and to Rivka, and he throws the get, and lands. Right, there are two witnesses saying that it was closer to her. Two witnesses saying that it was closer to him. Those two witnesses should simply cancel themselves out. That's not a suffix d'oraisa, it's a suffix d'Rabbanan. The two pairs of witnesses cancel themselves out. And therefore, we should maintain Rivka on her chazaka that, Sarah and Rivka on the chazaka that Reuven is married to both of them, and she should be pater from Yibum. So, midi dehava nichse d'Barshacha, just like the property of Barshacha, the Barshacha is of a nichse, that this fellow Barshacha, he sold property. Also Beitreva Amre, and then two witnesses came and they said, Kishu Cholim Zovin, that Barshacha sold the property when he was healthy. Also Beitreva Amre Kishu Shota Zovin. The two other witnesses came and said, no, he sold the property when he was in a foolish state. Rashi says, look, we have two witnesses saying that he was in a healthy state. We have two witnesses saying he was in an unhealthy state. So they cancel themselves out. And we say, look, what we know is that Barshacha owned property. Maybe he sold it, maybe he didn't sell it. The chazaka is that it's his. So therefore, and therefore the property remains in Barshacha's possession. So what do we see? So we had this question. We had wanted to say yesterday that when it comes to suffix Gittin, it will not be strong enough to override the chazaka, which is that Reuven is married to Sarah and to Rivka, and that Rivka is pater from Yibum, and therefore she doesn't even do chalitza because it could end up leading to Yibum. Now, we have a Mishnah, however, that says that in this very case where there's a suffix get, so then Rivka would do chalitza. So the question is why? So Rav and Rav Yosef wanted to say, well, because in that Mishnah where we say that Rivka should do chalitza, that was where there were two pairs of witnesses, and therefore it's a suffix d'oraisa, and that's why she does chalitza. But if it's two pairs of witnesses, then they should just cancel themselves out. So rather, Elo Omer Abaye, rather says Abaye Yagid Olav Reo, that the pasuk says in Eov that his friend should say about him, meaning Tana b'Kiddushin v'Adin l'Gerushin, that when it mentions that Kilo, we're treating Kitten and Kiddushin like as friends, so to speak, and treating them similarly. In that, Tana b'Kiddushin v'Adin l'Gerushin, that when the Mishnah mentions that he throws the Kesef Kiddushin, it's 50% closer to her, 50% closer to him, and we're saying that by the Kiddushin, we treat it as a suffix, and Rivka would do chalitza. It's the same thing for Gerushin as well. Tana b'Gerushin, Vuadin the Kiddushin, and also what it says by Gerushin is the same thing for Kiddushin. So basically all the examples, right, the Mishnah had given examples by Gerushin, had given examples by Kiddushin, says Abaye, guess what? All the examples apply to one another. And therefore, the example of throwing the get, right, just like by the Kiddushin, when you throw the money and it's 50%, it's unclear if it's closer to him or closer to her. So then Rivka does Chalitza, the same thing would apply to Gittin as well, that actually if the get is uncertain if it's closer to her or closer to him, so then Rivka would also do Chalitza. Omerle Rav, and Rav says Tabai, Iyagir Olav Reo, that if we're saying that, right, that both Gittin and Kiddushin are the same, so my Zeu de Katani, right, if we look in the Mishnah, it says Zeu Safek Kiddushin, this is the Safek Kiddushin. But if we're saying that they're both, then what does it mean this, to exclude what? So El Amar Rav, rather says Rav, Kol sheyesh bi Kiddushin yesh bi Gerushin, all of the examples of Kiddushin apply to Gerushin as well. Yesh bi Gerushin ma she'ein bi Kiddushin, but Gerushin, divorce, has examples that are not in Kiddushin. V'zehu de Gerushin lav davke. When it says zehu, by divorce, it's not being specific. It's not coming to exclude anything. Elo mishum de tana zehu b'Kiddushin, tananami zehu b'Gerushin. But because it says zehu by Kiddushin, it says zehu by Gerushin. V'zehu de Kiddushin mutemai. When it says zehu, this is which is exclusionary by Kiddushin, which we're saying excludes something. What does it exclude? The mutizman de leka b'Kiddushin. To the exclusion of time, which doesn't apply to Kiddushin, right? You could betroth a woman, a man and a woman can get engaged essentially with money, sure, but also with a document, right? You can write Ariyat Mekudeshesli Bishtar Zo, and you can write that in a document. Now that document does not need to include time. And how come the time does not need to be recorded in a betrothal document? Okay, so I can understand if it's because of pere. Arusa leis la pere, a engaged woman doesn't have pere. What does it mean? Pere are fruits. It's talking about the fruits of nichse malug. What are nichse malug? Nichse malug are properties that the wife brings into the marriage, that as long as they're married, the husband can benefit from them. But if they get divorced, then she takes them back, and of course he can no longer benefit from them. So in the divorce document, you have to write a time you have to write the time of the divorce on the document. So if you say that the reason for writing the time is in order to prevent the husband from taking the fruits of these fields anymore, right? Meaning if it says the date of the divorce, that means that from that date on, the husband can no longer benefit from these fields. And if he does, he has to pay her back for it. Now that doesn't apply to Kiddushin because she doesn't bring the fields in to the engagement, she brings it into the marriage. And therefore, if we're saying that the point of the date in the divorce document is in order to know when the husband is no longer able to be eating from these fields, well then, that doesn't apply to Kiddushin where the fields don't come into play yet, because that only comes later at Nisuin when they actually get married. But if you say that the reason for writing the date in the divorce document is out of concern of, well, what if he's married to his niece? What if he's married to his brother's daughter? And then we have to be concerned what happens if Reuven is married to Sarah, and Sarah is his brother Shimon's daughter. And Sarah has a an extramarital relationship with somebody else. So now she's that can get her into big trouble. So it's Reuven's niece, however. Maybe he's going to have mercy on her, and he'll claim that they were already divorced at the time that she had this relationship. So now, but you can't just lie about that. So in order to prevent the situation where if Sarah has an extramarital relationship and Reuven might have mercy on her and say, no, we were already divorced, that's why we need a time in the document, so that, based on the date recorded in the document, we'll know whether they were divorced at that time. So if that's the case, so then, okay, great. Why don't you put the date in the marriage document as well, so that so that you'll also know from at what point they are married. And if she has a relationship with somebody else, so then we'll kind of know that it was after that time, before that time, after that time, based on that time. So mishum deika de mekadesh b'chaspa v'ika de mekadesh b'shtar lo takun rabbanon zman. So the Gemara answers, well, not everybody gets married with a document, right? Some people get married with money. Well, most people, at least nowadays, get married with money, right? And therefore, while the date might help in a document, it's not going to help, for like a ring or something like that. So therefore, look, since not everybody gets married with documents, so we're not going to, make you put the date in it, because date is really only something that would work for a document. It wouldn't work for like a ring. So forget about the date. But then Rav Yosef asked Rav Ashi, he says, you hear the question? That if you're buying a slave, well, some people purchase slaves with money, some people purchase with documents. So based on that logic, I would assume that the document should not include the date, since not everybody uses a document. Some people use money. We're talking about Zman. And yet, the rabbi said that you do put the date in that document for purchasing a slave. But I don't know, if some people purchase with money rather than documents, so then what's the point of the date? It's not going to be a date when you purchase with money. So asam ruba b'shtare, hacha ruba b'chaspa. The difference is that most people who buy slaves, apparently, they buy them with documents. And therefore, since that's the primary way of purchase, so then we put the date in there. Whereas when it comes to Kiddushin, of course, as we are familiar with, most likely, it is with money, with like a ring or something like that. And then, I think pretty much exclusively with a ring. And then, since that's the primary way of getting married, so even if you're going to get married with a document, don't worry about the date, since it's really going to be irrelevant in most of the cases when money is used. Alternatively, another reason why there's no point of putting the date in the marriage document, mishum de lo efshar. Because what's the point? What are you going to put you're going to leave the document by her? Meaning, what would be the whole point of the date in the document? Well, let's say she ends up having a relationship with somebody else after she's already engaged. Well, and we're saying, well, if the date is there, then if they come and say, well, the relationship happened before they got married, we'll be able to look at the date and see if it was before or after. But, okay, so you have this document. Who's in control of the document? If she's in control of it, she'll just erase the date from the document. And then there goes the date. Lincha gabe didei, if you leave it by him, zimnin de basachosohi, umechape Allah. Well, what if she's his nephew, and then he's going to have mercy on her, and he's going and cover up for him anyways. Lincha gabe edim, and maybe you'll put it by the witnesses. Well, still, what do you need a date for? If they remember when the marriage happened, then they'll just come and say, look, we're testifying that the marriage happened on this and this date, and their testimony is valid. Forget about the date in the document. Below, and if they don't remember when it happened, well, then maybe then they'll look at the document and they'll come and testify based on what's written in the document. But the Torah says that they have to testify from their own personal mouth, right from their mouths, not from their, what's written somewhere. And therefore, there seems to be really no point in writing the date in the marriage document. If that's the case, why don't you say the same thing by divorce? What's the point of writing the date in the divorce? So, let's say like this. So, and for the Gemara, well, they're kind of opposite cases, right? The point of the date in the document, when it comes to divorce would be to save her, right? Meaning, for example, if you have if Reuven is married to Sarah, and she's right there, she's she's suspected of having an extramarital relationship. Well, the chazaka is that she's married, And therefore, the only way that she can kind of get out of it would be to bring a document proving that they were already divorced at that time. And therefore, the point of the date would be to help. And if she goes and erases the date, well, then we just go based on the chazaka, which is that she's a married woman and there's going to be issues there. But, so therefore, in that sense, the date actually serves a purpose, which is it can actually prove that she was already divorced at the time. Whereas when it comes to Kiddushin, the date isn't really going to help anything, because the chazaka is anyways that she's not married, right? She's a single woman. We're trying to prove that no, she's not a single woman, she's married, right? Meaning we're not sure if she had a relationship with somebody, and we're not sure if it happened before she got married or after she got married. So we have a suffix. So the chazaka is that she's not married, right? And we're trying to, and then she had a relationship, and we're trying to prove that she was married at the time. She'll just erase the date, and you just go based on the chazaka that she's a single woman. And therefore, there really isn't any point in having the date in the marriage document, but in the case of the divorce document, it can actually help prove that she was divorced at that time. Alright friends, we get up to a new Mishnah. This is a Mishnah we've seen before. Gimel Achin Sun Be Gimel Nachris. Okay, so you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. They are married to Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel. Now Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel are not sisters or anything like that. They're all random. Fine. Gimel Achin Sun Gimel Nachris. Vameis Echad Mein. Reuven dies. Vasa Basheni Maimer. And then Shimon does Maimer with Sarah. Okay. Vames, and then Shimon dies. So then, so they do chalitza, right? Sarah and Rivka do chalitza. They do not do yibum. Okay, Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Vames echad me'en, that one of them dies, Yevamos yavo aleh, then you do yibum, shaleh zikas yavam echad, v'lo shaleh zikas beis yivamim. You need the zika of one yavam, not two yavams. Meaning, since Reuven died, and then Shimon did Maimer with Sarah. Now, Maimer, of course, is only Midrabanan, right? He basically gives her Kesef Kiddushin, and it only counts Midrabanan. Midoraisa, he has to do Yibum with her in order for it to matter. So Midoraisa, Shimon and Sarah are not married. Midrabanan, there's this Maimer thing, which is key that they are married. So therefore, when Shimon dies, so Sarah is like, has the is connected to both Reuven Midoraisa and Shimon Midorabanan, and she's connected to both of them, and therefore Yibum doesn't apply. Because Yibum doesn't apply, that is why, right? Yibum only applies when it's coming from one, right? So for example, Reuven dies, Shimon does Yibum with Sarah. But right now when Shimon dies and Sarah is connected to both Reuven and Shimon as well, because Yibum wasn't done, but Maimer was done. So then they just do Chalitza in that case. Reb Shimon Omer, Miyabim Lezer Shiyotze v'Chalitza Shnei. Reb Shimon says that you do Yibum with one and you do Chalitza with the other, because we learned a few weeks ago, I think, that according to Reb Shimon, he's not sure how to treat Maimer. Do we treat Maimer like marriage? And if we treat Maimer like marriage, so then in that case, he's married to both Sarah and to Rivka, which means that you only do Yibum with one of them. Then the other one really you don't have to do anything, so you do Yibum with, let's say, Sarah, and you don't have to, and that's it. Rivka doesn't have to do anything. But if Maimer doesn't work, so then if that's the case, then both Sarah and Rivka need to do Yibum, because if Maimer doesn't make any difference, so then Reuven died, Sarah needs to do Yibum, Shimon, right? Maimer is irrelevant. Shimon dies. Rivka needs to do Yibum. So then, in that case, Levi would need to do Yibum in both. But so you just do Yibum with one and do Chalitza with the other one. But right. So because we're not sure if Maimer actually counts as marriage, in which case you would only have to do Yibum with one and nothing with the other, or if Maimer is absolutely nothing, in which case you could do Yibum with both of them. But we're not sure. So just do Yibum with one and Chalitza with the other one. Fact the Gemara, V'zikas beis Yevamos deraisa Chalitza nami lo tiboy. Friends, you hear the kasha? If the rabbis are saying that Vames echad me'en Yevamos yavo eleh shaleh zikas yavam echad lo shaleh zikas beis Yevamos, right? The Mishnah had said that the rabbi's opinion is that if Sarah has a zika from both Ruvain and from Shimon, so then she's pater from Yibum. Well, if that's the case, we're saying that midoraisa, right? Zika is based Yevamos midoraisa. If we're saying midoraisa, she's pater from chalitza, from Yibum, so in chalitza nami lo tibai, then she shouldn't have to do chalitza either. And for the Gemara, el midorabanan. Rather, when we say that she's chayeves, so rather we say that that this concept of that you only do yibum when it comes from one house but not from two houses, right? That when he does mimer, so then she doesn't do yibum. That is really only midorabanan, because midoraisa mimer is nothing, and midoraisa you could do yibum. Beis Yevamos habos m'bayis echad misyabmos. But we're concerned that because he did mimer, right, even though mimer midoraisa is nothing, and technically Sarah is still coming from Ruvain and Rivka is coming from Shimon, technically Levi can do yibum with both of them. However, we're concerned that because Shimon did mimer with Sarah, we're concerned that maybe people will draw the wrong conclusion, which is that when you have two co-wives from one household, you do yibum with both of them, right? Meaning if people would see Levi doing yibum with both Sarah and from Rivka, they might think that, well, Shimon did mimer with Sarah, so I guess he was married to both Sarah and to Rivka, and now Levi is doing yibum with Sarah and Rivka, so I would think that when you have somebody who has two wives and he dies, so then you do yibum with both of them. But that's not true. When you have l'chada v'nechlotz l'chada, so why does it, Levi can do yibum with one and chalitza with the other? Why does he have to do chalitza with both? Well, because people then might say, well, so when you have one person, right, you have somebody who's married to two wives, and then he dies, so you do yibum with one, you do chalitza with the other, but that's not true. V'yamu, says the Gemara, but let them say that, who cares, what's the big deal? So the Gemara says, look, if you have somebody that had two wives, and you did yibum with the first one, and chalitza with the second one, it's really not a big deal, because after you did yibum with the first wife, so then the second wife, is off the hook. But nonetheless, if you do chalitza, so what? So you did chalitza, it's not, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't, it's nothing wrong being done. But the concern is, what if you do it the other way around? That if you first do chalitza, and once you do chalitza, so then yibum is over. But then if you're going to do yibum, that's a problem, because you're sleeping with your brother's wife, and it's outside of the context of yibum, because you already did chalitza with the other one. The pasuk says that once chalitza is done, and you're not going to do yibum, you won't do yibum anymore. And therefore, once you did chalitza with the first wife, so then yibum is done. And if you do yibum with the next wife, then you're just sleeping with your brother's sister, and that's a problem. So if we say just do chalitza with both of them, Omer Ravi says Ravi, Nosan get l'maimaro hutra tzaraso. That in the case, right, that says Ravi, that in our situation, right, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, Reuven's married to Sarah, Shimon's married to Rivka, Levi's married to Rachel, and Reuven dies, and then Shimon does mimer with Sarah, but then what does he do? Nosan get l'maimaro. He then gives her a get. He did mimer with Sarah, but then he did a get l'maimaro, just to undo the mimer, but not necessarily the get was only meant to undo the mimer, but not necessarily as like a chalitza kind of thing, right? Meaning gets aren't chalitza, but meaning he wasn't looking to break up the zika, right? He was looking to just break up his mimer, right? Meaning if he were to give a get to Sarah, right, to indicate that he's not interested in doing yibum with her, so he would still need to do chalitza, but he can no longer do yibum at that point. But here in this case, Shimon did mimer with Sarah, but then he just kind of undid the mimer, right? He kept the zika, but he undid the mimer. He wasn't looking to indicate that he's not interested in doing chalitza, but he just kind of undid the mimer. So we had said in our Mishnah that if Shimon does mimer with Sarah, so both Sarah and Rivka do chalitza if Shimon dies. But in this case, he basically just undid the mimer. So in that case, right, nasan get the maimaru huchut sarasa. Well, in that case, when Shimon dies, Rivka can do Yibum with Levi. Avo, he asura, but Levi should not do Yibum with Sarah, because just in case a situation where actually Shimon gave a get to Sarah and intended not only to undo the mimer, but also to not, for it to count as a chalitza. So, and in that case, so then, in that case, Levi would be unable to do Yibum with Sarah, because once you kind of give the get and indicate that you're not interested in doing Yibum, so then you can't do Yibum. So therefore, out of concern of the case where Shimon gives a get with the intention of not doing Yibum, so in that case you wouldn't be able to do Yibum. So even when he only gave the get to undo the mimer, but not to undo the Yibum, even then, right, when it was only to undo the mimer, still, if Shimon dies, you would not do Yibum with Sarah. Ikadamar, that those who say, Amarav says Rav Nosan get the Maimaro, that if Shimon gives a get to a get just for the mimer, well then Hutra Afilu Hi, then you can even do Yibum with Sarah. My taima, my Da'avid ba Shakli, well, because simply whatever he did, which was the mimer, he just undid the mimer, but that's it. Otherwise, she just goes back to be a regular Yevama, and she can do Yibum. Alright, friends, that was Daf Lamed Aleph, Masechta Yevamos. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.